Hi there, and welcome to a really exciting episode where we talk with Karen Bashford about going from breakdown to a breakthrough. She takes us on her journey of nervous breakdown due to toxic family relationships that led to breaking through the old ways into a new life. She shares a lot about her journey. She shares a lot about the traumas that she's been through and had to overcome. But it's such a positive, encouraging, upbeat episode. Karen's energy is just so infectious, and she shares wonderful stories of how she really learned to choose to live an aligned life, to follow her inner wisdom and tap into her intuition, and how she's helping others on finding path onto their empowering journey. So let's dive in, just fasten your seatbelt and let's go.
But before we get into our conversation with Karen, we just want to remind you about our newsletter that we have. Please sign up. The link is below. We also have a Patreon account where we put all the gold nuggets in that we get. And today we had a beautiful, succinct, really great nugget, which I think can help everybody. I'm just going to put it out there, everybody. But also, please subscribe, please share, please like our Spotify pod episode and on YouTube, and share with anybody who you think will benefit or enjoy this episode. But now let's get back to our wonderful conversation with Karen.
I just want to say warm welcome to Karen. Hi there, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my story a bit. So thank you.
Absolutely our pleasure. So let's start with that. Let's start with a little bit, who you are and what is your story? What took you on the journey that you are on right now? I know it's a huge question, so, take as much time as you want. Take us as deeply or as back in the past as you want. It's up to you to kind of give us and our listeners a little bit of a perspective, a little bit of a context to what is it that we might be talking about, what led you on the journey that you're on right now.
Okay, well, I would state before we start, if I upset anyone by what I say, my apologies, because my journey has been painful. It involves abuse and trauma, and it also involves the ability now to be able to laugh at my journey and the experiences I've had. So forgive me if I seem insensitive and actually laugh at some points, because that's how I now deal with my life.
It's important to put it out there and acknowledge that not everyone will be at the same place as you are right now. But for those who have been through the journey and done the work, it's such an important thing to be able to look back and not always feel those heavy emotions and just bring the lightness. So already, thank you for the disclaimer. That's so important to say.
Thank you. My journey. Well, childhood was very much parents that didn't know how to express love. They never said the word I love you, and they certainly didn't give me any hugs. Not that I knew that until I was 50 years old, because it was the norm. And yet, interestingly enough, everyone I come into contact with once I was 18 plus, my first reaction was to have a hug from them if I could. And I'm the first one to say to my friends, I love you. That has become so important. And that was even before I realized that my parents had never said it to me. So that's where it all started. Searching for love, I then met my husband, who happened to be emotionally abusive. I managed to stay with him for 16 years because I got married in church and I'd made a promise. And I didn't want to break that promise. Having finally removed myself from that relationship, instead of giving myself the space and time to review my life and heal, I went into another relationship. Unfortunately, the next relationship was a gentleman who was a Jekyll and Hyde character. could be as nice as pie, very loving, put alcohol or drugs in him, and he changed totally. It took me nearly 19 years to get myself out of that relationship because he destroyed my confidence. I learnt a lot in that relationship. And interestingly enough, in starting to work on myself, I started to change him. So in the end, he wasn't physically abusive to me anymore. He was a lot more understanding, and he finally recognized that he was losing me because he did not respect me. And I couldn't take that disrespect anymore. I'd stopped loving him. And what surprised me was the fact that in all those years of the physical abuse, emotional abuse, and being scared of him coming home, I continued to love him. But then that was the love I knew. So that's my early years. So I'll stop there for the minute.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing so openly and taking us on the journey of a little bit of a context. I do think that it's important to talk about these things because there can be so many people out there who still struggle, who are still in relationships, and who kind of feel, like some people know that they're in abusive relationships, and some people just accept that this is the relationship it is, this is what I deserve, and they don't even question, or maybe they are not even aware of the amounts of pressure and abuse. And again, the abuse not always looks the same. And yes, we may love the person, there might be some emotions, but I'm curious to know, then you said, this is the early years, is the early experiences. When then comes a moment where you start realizing that, your past experiences maybe have not been the healthiest one, and maybe have led you through some challenging periods that you need to work through and understand, because getting to the breakthrough point of just awareness and realization and starting to work on, I'm not even talking about doing all the work and figuring out what kind of work needs to happen, finding the right people and putting the time, but even just breaking through the fog, the life, the dogma, the reality that it is what it is. How did that look for you to then getting to the stages of starting to work on it?
It took a long time. I, looking back, recognized that my health was a warning sign. I had, just after I separated from my husband, I developed an autoimmune disease, which basically you get when you're 4 years old. I was nearly 40. And the prognosis is, as a child, you live for 10 years. So I had no idea. It took nearly 2 years for them to finally find out what the autoimmune disease was. And they treat it as a cancer. But I refused point blank to have chemotherapy. So instead, I was given antibiotics, because basically the autoimmune disease meant that my white cells did not recognize my body did not have bacteria, but it continued to eat my body from inside out because it thought I had bacteria, predominantly in my lower lungs, in my thigh, but we never knew exactly where it was. They were just the places that my breathing became very erratic and I had pain in my leg. But that didn't mean to say it wasn't anywhere else. Unfortunately, due to a prescription, I'm not sure what you'd call it, they gave me 800 milligrams of antibiotics instead of 200 milligrams a day. I was actually poisoned by those antibiotics. That then took me into a place of, how do I heal myself physically? But in the process of learning to heal myself physically, I then discovered I had to heal emotionally. And that's when my true journey began.
And I think it's quite similar for a lot of people, because we do not treat emotional and physical pain the same way. We are not taught that emotional pain requires and deserves the same amount of attention of any kind of a physical pain. So we often wait with the emotional pain. We suppress it, we ignore it, we learn to live with it, to a point where the body has no other option than to start giving us other signals, other signs to be like, okay, you're not paying attention to me giving you emotional pain. I'm going to start showing you physical pain. And it's where the body-mind connection comes in place. That's where so much of our physical ailments is caused by our mind, our physiological, mental, emotional state. So I would love to know that how then you kind of came to conclusion, realizing this connection and started working with it.
I did a lot of research around how could I heal, in the sense of, with the poisoning, what happened was my body could not cope with food, nor could it really cope with water. So I was having to boil all my water. I was having to filter all my water. Food-wise, there was basically 5 things I could eat without my body reacting. So it was a case of what could I do to help myself heal from that, because poison takes time to come out of the body. It actually took me 5 years to get to the point where I could eat normally again. But in going through the process of discovering how to heal my body, I then discovered that quite often the items or the aromatherapy or the reflexology or such like would release an emotion that I hadn't been aware I had. So I'd suddenly be in the middle of a session with somebody and burst into tears because they'd reached a point with what they were doing that touched my emotional aspect. And I was very good at hiding my emotions, exceptionally good. It was too painful to have them exposed. So yes, so that started the real discovery of the connection between what I thought and felt to what was actually physically happening in my body. And I should imagine it was also the time when my psychic abilities, which had been suppressed because of all the emotional trauma I'd been through, started to really come back into the play of my life. And I started to realize that I could allow myself to hear things that would guide me to the next point that I needed to do some healing, or it would guide me to somebody who would give me an answer that I wasn't even aware I was looking for.
You've just almost repeated or reiterated or confirmed what we've been hearing from guests is through the suppression of emotions. And we've grown up in being taught to suppress our emotions. You know, don't be so emotional. Why are you crying? Don't cry. Stop being so noisy. Stop laughing so loudly. Why are you giggling? You know, and we just learn to suppress emotions. And as well as when, you know, being in an abusive relationship, can almost be embarrassing to admit that you are in this relationship. So you hide everything that you're going through. And as Lenka mentioned earlier, the dogma of it, you know, is how do you admit to yourself, but then also speak to people about it when you're in the situation and you're not necessarily knowing how to or ready to or have the confidence to leave it. So you're in this place all on your own. And of course, when you suppress your emotions and you hide them, causes, and we've had guests before talking about, you know, trauma and the emotions and then the physical. But like you said, it's going to people and, you know, starting to look at your physical ailments, noticing, hang on a minute, there's something there, and having the courage to keep going. Because I mean, I can imagine that the first person who made you cry in a nice way, I mean, quite often, and you know, that's something that I would have done in the past, is like, oh no, we're not going down that road, and just not go back or not keep digging, because it's It's like when you lift up a carpet, you know, and there's all that dirt that you've just been scraping underneath the carpet, hiding, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my word, look at that. Do I really want to deal with that? And the easiest option is to put the carpet back down. But of course, that has the long-term effects, like a big lump in your carpet. So I'm going to use that analogy, but in your case, it's that physical ailment. It's recovering from poisoning through medication to help you from a autoimmune disease. So it's really having that courage to keep going, having that courage to dig out that dirt from underneath the carpet. So what kept you going with that? I mean, you said your psychic abilities were coming in. Can you explain a little bit how that was for you, but also what kept you going?
It's a good question because I can't give you a definite answer. All I knew is that I wasn't prepared to sacrifice myself to my husband and his behavior. My mother actually was very good. Although we had a close relationship, she was not very good at expressing emotions. None of my family knew that I'd even asked for a divorce until my husband told them. That's how secret my relationship was with my husband. None of them knew what I was going through. It was very, very secret. The same with my partner. It was very, very secret. I would turn up at work with bruises and I would always come up with an excuse. So they might have known about it, but I never ever spoke about it. But on the occasion when my divorce was finalized, my mother, bless her, sent me across a teddy bear. A lovely big teddy bear. And all she said on the message was, give it a cuddle when you need to. And recently I've found out that if you hold a teddy bear, the way you hold a teddy bear is the way you would hold somebody that you want to give a hug to. And that teddy bear became my lifeline of allowing myself to let go of my emotions. I would sit and cry holding that teddy bear. The cat I had at the time was also very good. If she sensed I was getting upset, she would come and just tap me and sit with me. So between the teddy bear and my cat, I got the emotional support that I wasn't seeking externally. I still wasn't ready to share my story with my family or my friends. It was only after I was actually poisoned and I had to start dealing with the aspects of my whole life having changed, which was, funny enough, more painful than actually all the abuse I'd been through previously, because that had an impact on me as a person, whereas with the abuse and trauma that I was going through from my partner and later on my, well, first my husband and then later on my partner, I discovered that I was very good at not needing to express my emotions. But in discovering that I was in a place where my whole identity had been challenged by my autoimmune disease and the poison, it was like suddenly I had to reach out for help to know who I was. And that was basically the turning point of changing my whole outlook on my life.
We've talked about, you know, in the past, your comfort zone, you know, that wonderful comfort zone. And theoretically, it's not actually really comfortable, but it sounds like you had that comfort zone. You sort of knew what was coming or how to deal with it, how to suppress it. But when you needed to, or you were put into a position where you really didn't have a choice, you needed to reach out, it's almost like stepping out of that comfort zone and creating a change in your life, but also in the way that you perceive yourself and the way that you're thinking of yourself. Is that a good way to describe it? Because I appreciate I don't understand what what you went through, but just trying to put it in, to say, layman's terms to help our audience to also try and understand, because unless you've experienced it, you don't necessarily understand it. But it's just trying to find a way to see, oh, are we getting, do we have a little iota of what it could have been like for you? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I would turn it around. I would say my comfort zone was my safe zone. It was what I knew as safety. I knew I could predict what my husband was going to do. I knew I could predict what my job was going to be. And I knew basically how my family would behave. So that was my safety zone. Then, getting the autoimmune disease, I was totally taken out of my safety zone. I was confronted with something that I had no knowledge about, because at that point I hadn't learnt about my body. I hadn't learnt to recognize the symptoms or the warning signs it was giving me to say I was out of balance, that I was out of sync with actually who I wanted to be and who I was showing up as. So it was like I stepped out of my safety zone into this big, wide world of unknowing, of uncertainty, whereas my safety zone was certainty. I could predict what was going to happen.
But it also sounds like, through the journey that you've been forced on with your health challenges, you then started, listening more to yourself. You started hearing voices and trusting your intuition and embarking on this path of choosing to live more aligned, or figuring out who you are and what the alignment could be, how to find and tap into your inner wisdom. Because as one of my soap operas that I always go on the soapbox is that we're never taught to listen to ourselves. We're always taught to listen and pay attention to what everyone else is telling us, but not nourish our innate wisdom, our intuition, listening within. I would love to know then how this journey for you has been of, empowering yourself pretty much to discover who you are, what you believe in, what you're good at, what you want from life, and how to align then and live in alignment with your inner wisdom.
Learning at 50 that my parents had never told me they loved me or hugged me was a big shock. It was just so normal, I didn't think to question it. That was a bit of an eye-opener, and that came about because I was working with a coach who said to me, what's the one thing you would love in your life the most? And I just blurted out, to be told by my parents that they love me and give me a hug. It just come out the blue. It was like it was time to start releasing what I hadn't been aware of. That was a turning point in the sense of I then started to question who I really was, because I'd realized that I'd been seeking a love from my partner and my husband that I knew but wasn't true love. So consequently, having that realization that the cause of my problem started within my parents' relationship with me, then allowed me to start questioning, why did this happen? Where did this come from? And obviously, I don't blame my parents, because I'm very much aware it's generational and it's gone back through God knows how many generations, because we were never taught to express love or to show love. That wasn't a done thing at the time. So it was this realization. And then it took a while, but it was the sudden realization that my family, my own brother and sister, contributed to my inability to connect to my emotions. because they both were quite toxic. But my mother was also a very demanding person in that she needed a lot of emotional support. And I just gave it without even thinking about it. From 50 to just before I was 63, I supported my mother without any support from my family, my brother and sister. At 64, I hit a barrier. My body went, no more. And it forced me to stop. But it was only my body. It took me 3 months to recover from that. Having recovered bodily, I then had a nervous breakdown. That was the turning point for me to start to really know who I was.
And it really shows us that it doesn't matter how old you are. We can be on this journey and start this journey at any age and be on it for years. It's not a quick journey. It's like, oh yes, I've realized that, all fixed, all sorted, because we do slip back. We do find that, and I love how you mentioned that your safety zone, we find it, we get comfortable or safe, and then something happens, and it sounds like your body first, and then having the nervous breakdown and having to deal with that. But did you find that through your experiences of in the past of healing yourself, especially from the poisoning and that, but also learning about who you are and starting to deal with your emotions, did you find that helped you to recover from the body and the nervous breakdown, that it gave you some tools and some direction of what to look like, that you weren't almost starting from scratch?
Definitely, it was very beneficial to have gone through what I'd been through healing myself. Interestingly, though, it was, how would I describe this? The nervous breakdown was a blessing, is all I would call it. It was an absolute blessing because it made me finally disconnect from my family as much as possible. So I wasn't repeating the same pattern of responding to the demands of my mother and my family that was no longer serving me. I didn't stop seeing my mother. I didn't stop serving her, but it also allowed me to recognize that I would never, ever get the love that I was looking for from her. She was incapable of giving it. She was doing her best, but she was incapable of giving it to me. So then disconnecting from my family allowed me to then start finally, and I say finally because that was the starting point where I surrendered to myself and just let go. The 5 days that I could not move from my bed was an eye-opener. I had to just stop and do absolutely nothing. My poor cat all she could do was let me get up, feed her, and go back to bed. She slept with me the whole time. And that was all I could do for her, was to get up, feed her. I couldn't even let her out because to let her out meant I had to go outside the flat, down a flight of stairs and let her out the main door. I couldn't even do that for her. Luckily, she's used to a litter tray. So that's how I had to stop, literally. Learning to just accept that I couldn't do anything but that, which is totally against what I would normally do. I'm very much on the go. I'm very much doing and such like. So that was a lesson that taught me patience. And having been through that, to then go into the nervous breakdown, patience was an absolute blessing to have learned. Because I could not stop crying. I spent nearly 3 months crying. But once those tears were finished, 3 months later, I was back to normal. But surrendering enabled me to go through that final realization that I needed to come inwards far more than I'd ever been allowed myself to do before. And just see what come up. And that's all I could do. I went back to that safety net that I had, but decided that I was going to remove that safety net. It wasn't going to be there anymore. And in doing that, it opened up a wonderful world for me.
What was there a moment of grief? Because you mentioned the crying and just surrender. Oh, I love that, surrendering to yourself. But was in that process some grieving happening? You know, grieving for the Karen that you were, the Karen that you're becoming, and is that sounding a bit right? Because I mean, obviously you were in it, but it just was when you were saying you cried for 3 months, it just came to me that was there some grieving for Karen happening?
There was grieving for Karen. There was grieving for the life that I'd missed, because having sacrificed myself to my family, I'd missed so much that I could have experienced. There was also the grieving of the fact that, how would I put it? What would I say? There was a grieving for the fact I hadn't acknowledged myself in the whole time I'd lived. There was always a reason not to acknowledge me and make me important. It wasn't regret. I don't do regret, and I never have done, and I never will. But there was an element of recognizing that in giving myself to so many others, I'd sacrificed my life. And I could never get that back. So yes, there was definitely grief. Grief for who I'd been, grief for what I'd been through, grief for recognizing that I'd given so much and yet I'd received so little back. And joy at the same time, because some of the tears, surprisingly enough, were sometimes joyful. It was almost like I was celebrating that I had this freedom now to be me. And yes, I was still looking after my mother in those 3 months. That hadn't stopped. In actual fact, that carried on for another 8 months before she was finally taken by my brother and sister to be responsible under their care. But it was like this joy that was starting to well up inside, that I finally had this sense of, I can find me in amongst all this rubbish that had been my life. It was absolutely phenomenal, surprising, shocking at times. The things I recognized that I'd been doing to myself without even knowing it was quite shocking at times.
The word surrender is one that I wanted to pick up on as well, because it is one of the words for this year for myself. And it really resonated with me because on this journey, we often feel that we need to be doing something, we need to be changing. We're the ones who have the agenda. So then there is a lot of intentionality, like, yes, we want to heal, we want to transform, we want to find a breakthrough, we want to, we want to do things. And I'm a doer. I like to have the agency over what I'm doing. But there's so much power in the surrendering and accepting. And I don't see surrendering anymore as something passive. I see it as such a important part, but I would love for you to touch a little bit more on what it meant for you and how do you approach, because for me surrendering is still quite difficult to be like, it is what it is, and I surrender and I accept, and I will see where that's gonna take me, because usually I'm like, no, I have a vision, we have all these wonderful people helping you visualize things and manifest things, and there's a little bit of a disconnect in my mind between, I can still have a vision, I can still manifest whatever I want, I still can create my reality, and yet I need to surrender to the universe as well. I'd love to get your perspective on this.
Okay. I would share that nowadays I have discovered that in human design, I am a manifesting generator. That means for me to be able to do anything, I have to know, or I have to wait for the guidance to come in to guide me to take action. Now, most people would say, oh God, you can't do that. You can't just wait. That's where patience comes in. Because in surrendering, you have to be patient. You cannot force something to happen. And going through the 3 months of crying, it was like, well, when is this going to stop? When the time is right, Karen. You're not going to stop crying. You're not going to go and do the next thing until you've done this. Wait. And that's all surrendering is about, is allowing the right time for something to happen. And you know instinctively, because you are connected to yourself so well in surrendering, that you don't question it. You just allow anything that's supposed to happen to happen. That doesn't mean to say you stop doing everything. You continue to do things, but you just have that patience to allow what needs to come in to tell you or show you the next step. A conversation can be something that gives you such a moment of, oh, okay, that was the question I needed answering. So that's where I'm supposed to go next, is it? So, and I've learned that invariably in surrendering, you are always given 3 things to confirm the next part of your journey. It's always 3 things that confirm the actions you're to take next.
That is such a great thing. 3 things. It's I guess it helps us to be more aware, to see these things. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, oh, what 3 things did I see that is taking me on my next journey? And you and Link are talking about surrendering, and I'm like, yeah, this is this is patience and surrendering and trusting in the universe are very new for me, and it's work in progress. But I get when you're saying is you're still doing things. You don't just sit on your couch and like, okay, I'm here, I'm waiting, but you still carry on doing. But those seeing 3 things that will show you the next direction or the next part of your journey, I think that is so magical. That's the word that comes to my mind, is magical, because it's when you are looking or surrendering and then seeing what's coming and what's giving you that, oh, this is something. It's, you can say, okay, that's 1, that's 2, and hopefully there's a 3 that comes. But it's such a powerful concept or powerful idea to look for and to be aware of conversations or where you're getting these nuggets from. Yeah, I am finding it quite difficult to explain what's going on in my head, because it just went bing. But it's trying to explain it and using the words, but the words are quite inadequate. This is why I'm struggling to say what it is I'm trying to say. But I really love that when you said that, because that just, I don't know, just something went in my head, just whew, yes, that makes so much sense. I get it. But then it's like, now I've got to be aware of what's going on, or where,
Can I give you
what
an
the direction
example?
is. Yes, please do.
Okay. My mother died in May of last year. I'd been saying since just after my nervous breakdown sort of finished that I wanted a holiday. But I didn't know where I wanted to go on holiday. And it was like, okay, I'm sensing I need a holiday. It's time to recover now in a totally different environment. And it took me until June, mid-June, before I suddenly thought, I'm booking this holiday. I don't know where I'm going. I'm just going to book this holiday and let's just see what happens. I tried all different places as an idea of where I wanted to go. Nothing appealed at all. One of the things I'd done in 2012 was to actually go to Egypt. And I'd always said I wanted to go back. However, I was kept saying to myself, I can't go in July. It's going to be too hot. No way. 40 degrees. No way. And yet I love heat. 40 degrees is nothing to me. I adore it. And I can stand out in the sun with no trouble at all in that temperature. And I kept saying, no, can't go, can't go. No way, not Egypt. So I actually put a request out on LinkedIn asking for suggestions. I had the most amazing information given to me. No, Karen, you can't go there. It's not going to work. You're not going to enjoy it. Really? Seriously? I belong to a group of women who hold a circle once a month. And the woman that runs is a very good friend of mine. And I actually spoke to her one day and said, I want to go on holiday. I cannot find where I want to go. Egypt keeps coming up. I cannot avoid it, but 40 degrees is too much. She said, Karen, you've got to go. There is a lesson in going. Okay. Literally less than 2 weeks, I was on a plane flying to Egypt. The flight was dead easy to book. Everything just fell into place. However, I arrived, and I seem to like late flights. So I arrived in Egypt with no cash, no phone, because I couldn't use my phone out there because it was just going to be roaming charges off the scale, and no language. Knowing that I was going to meet one person who I'd spoken to twice, who has organised this amazing 10-day trip into the desert for me. I arrived with my suitcase, walked out of the airport into the main greeting area, knowing I had to find a SIM card, to the booth to buy one. I knew which SIM I wanted. I obviously walked out and started looking around. And these 3 gentlemen who were dealing with hiring taxis and such like said to me, are you okay? Do you need any help? Yes, that would be nice. Thank you very much. They helped me phone the company the guy I was meeting and arranged to take me outside to meet him. They took me to the booth to buy my SIM card, all without asking for any money at all. No tips, nothing at all. They ensured that the gentleman who met me was the guy I was supposed to be meeting, because at which point I'd got my SIM in my phone so I could see the message from the company as to who was picking me up. I had not realised until that moment in time that I would have normally said, no thanks, I don't want help. I said yes, and it was to men. I never ever say yes to men, or I didn't up till that point. And yet here I was taking myself into Egypt with 2 men I'd never physically met, into the desert for a 10-day trip. That was the lesson I had to learn, predominantly that it was okay to trust men.
Wow, what a lesson. And as you were speaking, instantly in my gut was like, she's speaking to 3 strange men just randomly standing somewhere in Cairo in an airport in Egypt. And I'm like, I try not to have prejudice. I try to come to the world with their wonderful, lovely human beings everywhere we go. And yet there was just some reaction in me to be like, oh, that sounds dangerous. It sounds like not the right thing to do, to just randomly bump into strangers in a country where we have some biases, we have some prejudice, but we also know that the culture is a little bit more, men dominated. So it's so wonderful that for you it was a completely different experience and such a lovely lesson.
Absolutely. And the great thing about it was I never once felt unsafe. I knew in going to Egypt, I was going to be safe. I never questioned it. The only time I actually questioned my safety was when the driver, who was exceptional, absolutely, I never felt unsafe with them, decided to go up this very steep sand dune. And I mean very steep sand dune. And I was not watching where we were going. I was looking out the side window and I heard the engine shift and I was thinking, what's he doing? Because it was a real rev. And I just looked at what we were going to go up and thought, oh my God, what are we doing? And I'm not kidding. It was a second thought of, am I going to be safe? But it was gone. The excitement of going up that sand dune at the speed we did with the engine revving. And when we got to the top, the view, oh my God, the view was amazing. It literally showed you a vista of thousands. It looked like thousands and thousands of different limescale columns. It was out of this world. It was like almost like being on the moon, something entirely unexpected. And as I said, it was just split second of we're going up that.
Oh gosh, what an adventure. And, I don't want to be looking at time and I don't want to be, bringing this conversation to the end. I want to spend another half an hour, another hour talking to you. There's so much more we have yet to cover. But there's one thing I want to make sure that we have a moment to talk about is then coming out of this. We've heard a lot about your story. Obviously, there's so much more we could go into your healing journey. But I want to also talk about what you've done with that, what you do now, how you help others. Who are you helping with? Tell us a little bit more about then, at the top of the sand dune, you see the wonderful scenery. You have come to, I don't want to say have been healed and transformed, because I still think that it's a lifelong journey, but you have overcome this massive dune, and there might be some smaller ones, and there are still things going on. But you now have this view, you have this perspective, you have this experience, and you see others just struggling and you attract others who are struggling. So could you tell us a little bit more about what do you do? Who do you help? How does it work?
Thank you. I work with women predominantly over 40 who are looking at their lives having been through some kind of therapy already, whether it's speaking therapy or holistic therapy, whatever, who still sense that somewhere within them there is unhealed trauma. Whether they recognize it or trauma or not, it does not matter. They just sense there is something deep level that needs to still be healed, but they haven't found the person that can do that for them. With my soul growth therapy, I help them find their own answers. I do not tell them the answers. I don't need to. I work with them in such a way that they tap into their own innate wisdom, which basically is what I did on my whole journey, is constantly tap into my own wisdom. In tapping into their own wisdom, they're able to do exactly what I've done, and that is to release themselves from their past. And in releasing themselves from the past, they can then start to create the future that serves them. And if they want to go on that kind of adventure, I would always encourage them, because there's always a reason for it. If they choose to be more conservative and they just want to focus on their business, their family, or whatever, that's fine. It's whatever suits them. But in releasing the past, I then help them actually create their future and to manifest it as fast as they can possibly do so, having surrendered. I teach them how to surrender. So they don't have this constant push, but they allow and they accept. And it just happens so naturally. So that's what I do.
I mean, just talking with you today and, hearing your story and what it is that, you've been doing and your sand dune experience, it's learning to trust in yourself and learning to find that connection and reconnect with yourself. But it's also connecting with the humanness within you and not sticking to that path that we've been told to stick to, because a few years ago and many years ago, maybe even still now, is but you're too old to do that, you're too old. But it's just taking life and living it, or having more life in one's life, but living life in the way that feels right for you. And like you said, with the women that you're working with, is it because you want to focus on your business? Is it because you want to focus on your family? Or is it because you want to go have some really weird, crazy adventure, going up a sand dune? Not everybody's journey is for everybody, but it's embracing and trusting in yourself, but also connecting with yourself so that you can have that journey that suits you, because not everybody wants that 9 to 5 and that house and that family and etc that we grew up. Well, that's what you have to do. You go to school, you go to uni, you do this, you do that, and you get these little boxes that you slot into. You're now 30, that's the box you sit in. You're 40, that's the box. 50, but it's becoming much more freer now. And I've also heard on quite a few podcasts that I listen to is the clairs are coming back. And for those who don't know, the clairs is the clairvoyance and all the other clairs. I don't know them off, I can't remember them off the top of my head, but it's also something that you've been connecting to again. Like you said earlier, the psychic abilities coming back and learning to hear what's being said to you. And I think it's wonderful that you helping people to embrace that. So just one question is, how has your psychic abilities help you? And for those who know they're psychic or think they are or are on that cusp, just if you can just explain a little bit of that little journey that you've been on for anybody who is starting to become more aware of something other in their life. I hope that question makes sense.
Absolutely. And yes, it's a good question. How do I do it? Right. My first suggestion, if you start to be aware that maybe you're hearing things that you don't know where it's coming from, it's not from your mind, you're just conscious of a voice, but it's a friendly voice, or it might just be a feeling that you get in your body. You're looking at something and you're thinking, should I be doing this? And there's this sensation in your body that comes through. It's not normally something that you would associate with your everyday living. I often get smells. I am all 7 clairvoyant clairs, basically. I get smells, I get taste, I get people. I can feel into people's energies and actually physically feel them in my own body. I obviously hear the voices. I can sort of do a tarot reading and see potentially what's going to happen for somebody. So it's having this ability to just quieten yourself. The best thing you can do is to learn to have patience. And that, I know, is for a lot of women a big challenge. We are not patient creatures because we just want to be getting things done. But patience is something that will serve you unbelievably well. It's learning to just tune out the noise. So choose times when you can just allow yourself to quieten everything around you. So perhaps go for a quiet walk somewhere and just listen to what is going on in your mind. And if they're actual thoughts, dismiss them. You don't need to listen to them then. You can allow yourself. And I found that asking questions, what should I do? Who should I speak to? Is there something I need to know? Are the best questions I can ask myself, because that then allows what needs to come in to come in. It can be I see a book, or I speak to somebody and something comes out of that conversation that ties in with the book. Or I get a feeling and I'm thinking, why am I feeling this? What's this to do with? And I'll suddenly get, oh, I need to do this. It's just this inner sense of trusting that it's the quietest voice imaginable. You don't necessarily think you even hear at times. You just think, did I really hear that? But yes, you have heard it, and trust it. And the more you do that, I would go to bed of a night time and I'd be asking those questions. What do I need to know? Who do I know? Who do I need to speak to? What do I need to even see or hear? Or can you show me? You know, can I wake up tomorrow morning with some ideas of what I'm supposed to be doing? And just allow it. Don't even attempt to answer yourself your questions. Ask and go to sleep. And you'll wake up tomorrow morning, possibly having had a dream, or potentially you could find you're standing in the shower and you suddenly get an idea, or making a cup of coffee or tea. You'll stand there, your mind is quiet, so it has a chance to be heard. That is the best way of learning how to trust your intuition and your inner inner guidance.
Thank you for that. And I think that's really great. Like you use the word patience and trust. And these are things, like you said, we constantly wanting to be busy and just finding those quiet moments. So thank you for that really useful tips or guidance. Hop on to our Patreon account to get this episode's amazing and wonderful gold nugget. Now, for our listeners who think, you know what, we've had a couple of aha moments, or, you know, I need to connect with Karen, where can people find you?
They can find me at karenbashford.com. You'll find some stories on there about my life and such like. There's also a form to actually connect with me, to have a conversation with me. Or you can usually find me very much every day on LinkedIn at Karen Bashford Empower You.
Thank you so much. And we will have all the links in the description so that people can click and connect. And yeah, it'd be wonderful for them to connect with you, whether it's on LinkedIn or filling out the form. So thank you so much, Karen, for sharing your time, sharing your energy, and sharing your stories and experiences with us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, and thank you for having me here. It's been thoroughly enjoyable.
And for our listeners, what have you got from today? Did Karen hit a nerve, and have you had similar experiences to Karen? Are you living those experiences at the moment and wondering, how can I find a way out? Or have you come out the other side and gone up your sand dune? We would love to hear your stories. We would love to hear what you have gotten from today. Or are you starting to connect with your Claires? Or is this something you're thinking, whoa, ladies, what planet are you on? That's fine. We would love to know either way. We'd love for you to share with us, reach out, and let us know what aha moments you got or what connections you got from today's episode. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon. Bye.